We're at Summer Game Fest Play Days Day 2, and I've just played, which is probably the most ambitious and high values and incredibly spectacular MMO I've ever seen. And I'm not a fan of a genre, but you got me hooked. So first of all, what can you tell us about the technology and the art effort that is behind this game?
I think that'd be a great question for NC.
저희 뭐 게임 개발하면서 여러 가지 도전들이 있었는데 특히 저희가 이제 주목했던 건
A lot of people, this is an MMORPG with so many people, like hundreds of people playing together, right? So in one screen, people mingling together smoothly and not disconnected. At the same time, hundreds of people versus hundreds other people, combat. War is another good part of that. So the kind of combat, the graphic processing and synchronization should be smooth, and also some kind of an object, the background or people in a very far distance, it should also be very visible.
And if I'm correct, you recently ran a beta test in Korea. So what sort of feedback did you get from the community from that beta test? That's for NC, I think.
나눠서 얘기하시죠.
One of the primary comments we got was that the progression was rather a bit too slow, and a lot of grindy elements were inside the game, right? So there was actually not the intention for our game. Listening to user feedback, the developers changed it and made improvements so that when players, they played the only necessary content, then they can make enough amount of progression already in the character.
전투 관련해서는 전체적으로 이제 정적이다.
Number 2 comment was combat. A lot of comments were saying that our combat was rather static. So in order to improve the visibility in that combat, that's why we intentionally designed it to be rather static combat. But listening to player feedback, they also now acknowledged that it's rather a little bit far from the trendy combat, right?
Yeah, of course.
I just wanted to mention, as the publisher, I think it's really important that when we have our next technical test, that these changes are apparent in the build. And so when players play the AGS version on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox with crossplay enabled, they'll see iteration on these changes. And we're driven by player feedback. So we can't wait to put the build in the hands of the customers and then continue the iterative process to make TL the best it can be.
Okay, and I think to make combat more dynamic, as you just said, you of course also have the shape shifting and the way you can use the weather. So I think those two very specific aspects are really unique to this game and to the genre from now on. So what can you tell us about these two aspects and how you guys designed them to be into the game?
그 날씨에 대해서 말씀드리자면은 저희가 이제 하나의
Because when people are playing this game, for example, on a one field, it can be the same field, but they wanted players to have various experience even on one field. That's why. So not all the same experiences all the time, but maybe when it's night, people turn into werewolves, or also when it's raining, the vegetation, the trees, plants, they can change. So yeah, this kind of thing. Also, depending on this kind of weather or the day and night cycle, the rewards can be different, right? So people naturally come together, they go away. That's why the weather system is included.
변신과 관련해서는
So, for example, one thing that the morph can do is for traversal, world traversal. You go in the land, in the air, in the sea. You turn into various creatures for your world transportation. And besides that, we also have guardian. It's a kind of a very special creature you turn into. Like an ultimate power for your game, but it has a long cool time and it's introduced after like a mid way into the game. People also can transmorph into a golem, and then this golem can crash down, take down the castle wall. The wall, of a castle. So this kind of a special function in your combat in a war. So that is what morph is about.
Yeah, and during your video, you mentioned several ways. You just mentioned guilds. You mentioned several ways in which players can interact and can play together. So what can you tell us about different types of game types and game modes they can expect to find in both PvE and PvP?
Yeah, I think one of the things to remember about Throne and Liberty is the world is open and persistent, and
huge.
And so thousands of players are playing together and we focus on PvP and PvE in equal portions. For PvE, players can tackle open world bosses, raid encounters, open world dungeons, and then PvP touchpoints are also integrated in a way. So it's not just siloed PvP and then siloed PvE. Oftentimes it's PvX, players engaging in a PvE experience while also being cognizant of PvP happening around the area. But the penultimate PvP experience in Throne and Liberty is castle sieges, which the NC team alluded to. And so you have organizations of players facing off over a point of interest that has meaningful value. And we're really excited to see when players get their hands on TL and start sieging against each other, how the landscape will change, how they'll leverage the weather to their advantage during combat. There's many different facets, and it's always different every time you interact.
And then closing one, you just mentioned you guys are excited. I guess players are excited too to play. So when can they get to play? On which platforms? And what's the roadmap? And you just run this beta in Korea, but what about the Western communities? Do you feel like do you feel their excitement too?
Yeah, absolutely. We can't wait to have TL put in front of the global audience. For Amazon Games, we'll publish on PC, PlayStation 5, Xbox X and S, and it'll be with crossplay enabled. And so players will be able to try TL for the first time in our region during our upcoming technical test. And what's important for us, for both of our teams, is that the feedback from the Korean CBT is actioned before we have the next build available for players, so they can see how committed we are to actioning their voices and making TL the game that they want to play.
Looking forward to playing it myself. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.